I want to talk a little bit about the central bank digital currencies, if you guys don't mind. So the central bank digital currencies really are a centralized form of a coin or a cryptocurrency, if you will, that's being rolled out across the world. In my presentation tomorrow, I'm going to show you a map from the Atlantic Council showing all the different cryptos and where they are for all the different countries. There's a tracker they have is really neat. It seems as though the central banks and governments are getting on, the token or the digital currency train, and they're doing that. So I wanted to ask you, Mark, what is your thought on that, on the central bank digital currencies? Do you have any thoughts about, what those could be, and do you think that they'll be successful?
I think that the government will always sell us the idea that they're doing it for our own benefit. They're going to tell us that this is going to make life easier. It's going to benefit the general community. And I'm not here to argue that there's not potentially some truth to those claims. But I think what it really boils down to personally is taxation and privacy. And so I think the government has a very strong mandate and a very strong desire to tax us taxpayers, as much as they possibly can. And that's probably the number one driver behind their want or desire to adopt these digital currencies. And the second thing that I'd be concerned about, and I know people in this space, in the precious metal space, we understand our clients very well, and for me personally, is privacy. Is very, very concerning when there's nothing left in your life that you feel is your own and beyond the reach of government. I find that very concerning for myself personally, for my family. And so those would be I think the driver is taxation. I think the biggest concern, aside from paying your taxes or paying more taxes, is your loss of privacy overall as an individual. And to me, that's very, very concerning. So am I a fan of the idea? No, not yet. But it's early days, and like you said, there is this maturity level that we may reach at one point where these ideas and these concepts do become beneficial to us. And maybe there is an opportunity, but at this point in time, I'm quite skeptical, actually.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to take that one, Chen, as well?
Yes, I studied actually the Chinese digital currency during the Winter Olympic because they become, they can use the Chinese digital currency as well with a MasterCard in the Olympic. So I talked to a few experts in China. So what they have is the China, actually, the digital currency is most advanced in the world. You probably know in China, most people using phone to go to McDonald's, right? Actually, they're like foreigner, like me, we go to China, we give them the cash. McDonald's, sometimes they don't take it because it's, they just don't have change for us. So the digital RMB seems to be, according to the expert who told me, it's the next generation technology of crypto. So the cost of transaction is very, very low. It's about less than 1% of the current crypto. One of the key attraction of crypto is the transaction cost is low. Yeah. And then Chinese digital is much, much lower. It's so low that the government can sponsor it. So Chinese government basically said that the transaction fee is going to be zero. Okay, think about you go to Amazon, you buy stuff, and then you pay zero transaction fee. The Amazon will love it, right? They always fight between Walmart and Visa, Master, and Amazon with all the other because they charge like 3%. And the zero transaction fee is very, very attractive, I was told. And then from Chinese government perspective, actually they calculated by sponsor the digital currency, the zero transaction fee actually costs less than printing the paper, printing the currency. Actually costs less than that. So actually that could be the future, could be the way. There could be digital. I think that Chinese digital currency, if it's successful, will force the United States to create a digital currency. Actually, there's no alternative for United States not to answer that.
All right, so one thing I like to do is make this interactive. So we could sit up here and lecture and do a roundtable, but I'm going to go around and ask questions. Anybody here have any questions you want to ask the panel? I know I had my bolds out there. Thank you, sir. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, I guess I would just like a definition of a currency because no one, I'd love a definition of a currency because no one here book this hotel room with anything but USD, is my guess. So therefore, that my definition is something you use in everyday life. When will we use Bitcoin, gold, silver in everyday life?
Thank you. What was your name? Aram, thank you for the question. Either of you guys want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, a currency can be any means of exchange, essentially. It's very basic. But you're right. None of us use crypto, I guess. I'm guessing nobody used. If anybody did use crypto to pay for your hotel room, raise your hand. But you're probably right. But I'll tell you this. Real life example, our business has accepted crypto, Bitcoin primarily, as means of payment since 2017. So people buy gold and silver from us and pay for services using crypto, and we actually settle transactions in crypto as well. So if you sold gold or silver back to us, you can take payment in Bitcoin, which is essentially, in that transaction, a currency. We're paying you in Bitcoin, but as a business owner, we then convert that Bitcoin immediately back into US dollars so we can pay our employees and ourselves and go about our business. So yes, it can act as a currency, but it is nowhere near replacing the base currency, in this case, the USD.
I'd say probably what you just described is maybe more of a medium of exchange than like a store of value, right? Because you did have to convert it back into dollars.
Well, it's the currency is a legal tender for the certain country. It's a sovereign rights. Actually, if you travel to a lot of foreign country, and they do accept United States dollar, but they don't have to, right? But they have to accept their own currency, otherwise they're breaking the law. So it's the government power over there. So that's why sometimes you want to have a local money, you go to certain countries so you won't be taken advantage of. Otherwise, if you give them dollar, they give you a very, very terrible exchange rate. Anyway, so I think I can tell you from the history. I saw that, in Chinese history, silver was a legal tender for thousands of years, right? So when after Opium War, China run out of silver, they use opium sometimes as a currency as well. So anything that worth money, has value and easy to change hand can be a currency. And so that's why I feel like right now, silver price is very low. Okay, silver gold ratio is very high, but when silver getting more expensive, actually there's more chance the silver go back to the monetary status. That's my point.
Okay. Any other questions so far on crypto versus gold from the crowd? Yep. Down, I get you.
All right, this is more of a tech question, but I think it was the Escape artist. They had a crypto specialist on, and she was making the case that the Bitcoin is not private. Like, you can go in there and see it settle, and you could see how many transactions that ledger had. And if you were a government, you could see the on-ramp, meaning, where it came from a bank to that original exchange to that original ledger. And I think that was when I punched out on Bitcoin is like, precious metals, we could transact privately, but Bitcoin is not. Do you have anything to refute that?
So, good point. There was a paper by MIT that came out a few years ago where they basically proved that the cryptos are not anonymous because the way that they're designed, in order to validate transactions, we have to know the addresses from which the transactions are coming and whence they're going. And that means that you have created a persistent state for that ledger, and that ledger is tied to a human, right? Because humans ultimately are using this. Of course, other people get to use it. You have corporations or whatever the case may be. And if you get into smart contracts, it could be, software that basically does everything. But essentially, the way that crypto is designed is to reduce anonymity. And the reason that's the case is because most people don't understand the on and off ramp piece of it. The FBI and all the authorities have laws in place, and FinCEN and all the regulatory authorities that get involved in the monetary system have laws in place which stipulate, the know your customer laws, where you're in the banking system. So if you're taking money in and out of your crypto account, they know who you are, and all they have to do is tie that to your crypto address. And then basically that allows them to track everything. I think from my perspective, from a central bank digital currency perspective, that could be potentially dangerous because one of the things that cash does have along with gold and silver is it has that anonymous aspect. You can pass bills on and they can track it by serial number, but they can't necessarily track it to an individual. And so I think that's the challenge a lot of people have, especially guys like us who are old money advocates or people who have, grown up through the existing systems we've had. We see it as, wait a minute, this is not a feature, this is something that we don't like. And I'm sure there are lots of other benefits we could talk about, but that anonymity one for me is a big one, which is why I don't really use it. Now, full disclosure, I do have some Bitcoin miners. I'm in a mining pool. So I do mine Bitcoin, but it's just for speculative purposes. But I don't ever plan on exchanging or using as a currency. For me, it's just like buying a stock or buying a piece of real estate that I'm investing in. I'm investing in Bitcoin because I think it's going to go back up. I think it's shown that it's going to be highly speculative and people will drive it back up. But for my own purposes, I don't plan on using it as currency. Thank you for the question. I appreciate that. By the way, that's Independence Money sitting over there. They'll be also doing a session today as well. What time are you guys doing today? Oh, what time tomorrow? All right, awesome. So Independence Money will be here doing tax. For you guys who are interested in doing some tax planning, I wanted to do a shout out for them. There's also a video of them on my channel if you guys are interested. All right, I think we have a few minutes left. There's another one starting here about 10 or 15 minutes after. Any other questions from the crowd on crypto versus gold and silver? I'm going to throw silver in there. I think this is crypto versus gold, but I still think silver is money. So.
Thanks, Rob. Yep. Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you. You're storing some of my silver in the Cayman Islands. Thank you. If you were subpoenaed, how much of a fight would you put up? Let's say you were subpoenaed to turn over a list of investors. How much of a fight would you put up to resist that?
So the question, in case anybody didn't hear, is if you have metal stored, how much of a fight will people put up to protect your individual details?
That's a very good question. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming out. So the laws in the Cayman Islands, so I'll start with the basic principles. It's a place that has a tremendous amount of respect for people's privacy in general. You can imagine that island is basically, it's the lifeblood of the country, is financial services. So if you start stripping away that privacy aspect, Cayman Islands no longer really exists as we know it today. So the government and people are very aware of that. So as a precious metals dealer operating in Cayman, we don't have any reporting requirements either to the local or foreign authorities to begin with. So there is no exchange of information. Your question, if we received a subpoena, which cannot come from the United States, by the way, that's not how it works. So there's no government agency showing up in Cayman and dropping a subpoena on our doorstep. They have to go through the Grand Courts of Cayman and make an application to receive information. If the Grand Courts in Cayman approves that request for information, they have to build a case, and if they approve that request, we will receive notice from the Grand Courts, and at that point, we would provide the information, because if we don't, we risk going to jail. It's a criminal offense not to comply with the court order. It's happened once in 8 years that we opened our vault in Grand Cayman. We had one request for one client, and it turns out he was involved in pedophilia. So we were happy to grant the request and to provide the information, but that is how it works. In terms of fighting, we would definitely engage with our lawyer and ask all of the right questions. But when you receive the request from the Grand Courts, you should comply. Otherwise, you do face jail time. That's the way it works.
And to expand upon that point, don't they also have the ability to, I know in the U.S., if you didn't comply with the court order, they get a warrant, they can come in. And if you are allowed that, they may be able to get more information other than that client that they requested. So it may actually be better for you in the long run, to comply with that request to keep the rest of your clients' information private.
Yeah, I mean, so the approach in any business, especially when you're in the vaulting world, the approach that you take is you do a very deep background check on your clients up front. So that information, again, is private to the vault and to the business, but we want to keep the bad apples out, because if a bad apple, like in this case, this guy that was involved with pedophilia got in, that opens the door for requests for information. That's what we want to avoid from the get-go. Yeah, to your point.
Perfect. Still open for questions. You guys have any additional questions? Crypto versus gold, silver, anything you guys want to talk about on the panel? Chris? All right. This is Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics is going to ask us a question.
Thanks for the panel, guys. Chen, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about the perspective on silver in China. Are they viewing it differently than we do here in the West? And anything you could touch on? I know you talked a little bit about that last week.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, I have a presentation 1 p.m., so I have a more detailed presentation on that as well. In general, in Chinese, if you say bank, means the place stores silver. It's in Chinese, okay? So that means the bank is where silver stored. So it has been silver standard for thousands of years. And Chinese emperor always try to move away from silver standard because they want to be able to print, but always fail. Every time the paper system fail because they print too much. So I think there's still, the silver still in the, say, Chinese culture. But right now, the problem I can tell you is the silver is too cheap. I mentioned that one of the reasons is that if you want to, used to be a silver bar can feed a family for a few months, right? Now the silver bar worth so little, right? So if you want a lot of wealth, you need to have this room full of silver bar. It may not worth that much because silver gold ratio is so high. Historically, it's 1 to 10, 1 to 15, 1 to 12, those kind of, now it's almost 1 to 100. I mean, close to that, it's not exactly. So I think as silver getting more expensive, people will view it more like a monetary tool. And I think we are at the beginning of the run of silver. And you can welcome to come to my presentation.
What time is your presentation? 1 p.m. today. You see Chen from Chen Stock Picks. Thank you, Chen. All right, I think you had a question over here. Yes? Okay.
Hi, my name is Patrick. I guess for some context, I'm a retired Bitcoin miner and I mined back in 2015. So here I am sitting today, 2022, and I'm considering what you guys are saying, but I'm having a hard time digesting it because as you sit here, you tell me silver is, highly anticipated to go up in value, and I agree with you, right? I'm here because I believe silver to be a portion of my solution to managing my wealth. So what I'm trying to say is my equation is 50% Bitcoin, 25% cash-like assets, of which silver is my position, and 25% in like perspective investments like altcoins. So for me, I'm trying to understand, with Bitcoin being in such limited supply, it's the only asset class in history that has ever had a limited finite supply. And I'm trying to understand if we're doing things on the up and up, what's the point of having our transactions being on a live ledger or being able to hold Bitcoin as a store of value? So I'm just trying to understand where you guys are seeing that Bitcoin fails in comparison to precious metals and how there's, in my opinion, I see no way that it will outperform Bitcoin. So your idea is, what I'm hearing is get into silver, get into Bitcoin after silver pumps. But by that point, Bitcoin's going to be over $200,000, $300,000. So your value, nothing has ever outperformed Bitcoin in a 4-year period. So I'm trying to understand that.
No, it's a really good question, and thank you for asking it. It's one of the ones that, I'll go back up on stage here, guys. It's one of the ones that everybody asks, and it's an awesome question. And that's the question I had when I first started looking at it. I'm really a tech guy, right? So I'm diving in, I'm looking at the white papers for Bitcoin. This is years and years ago. And I'm like, this thing is awesome. I mean, the way that it was originally designed, it really was meant to be a solution to the fiat monetary problem that was more based on technology and was considered more of a quote-unquote progressive answer to the monetary system. When I began looking into Bitcoin, however, I started figuring some stuff out that I think was kind of disturbing. Now, I am a miner, right? So I do it for speculative purposes. The reason I have, I think, some challenges with Bitcoin as currency is mostly because who's controlling it. So if you look at the design of Bitcoin, the node concept and how that all works is supposed to be decentralized. But one of the ways you can centralize things is to control what? Is to control development of the protocol and of this ecosystem. And right now, there is a particular group that has a lot of control over Bitcoin, and they've decided to make some decisions, such as keeping small block sizes and things, which are challenges with allowing Bitcoin to scale. And the original concept of Satoshi, if you go back to the original papers, was something that would not be block limited, something that could expand and scale, and that was the original design. My question is, why aren't they letting it do it? And if you look at 7 transactions a second, it's not feasible to be a real world currency. You can use it in niche applications, but you can't expand beyond that. If you just look at the amount of people in China, for example, I mean, you could only have a very small subset of that population affect transactions on a daily basis. So there are some things with the way they've implemented that protocol that needs to change. There was a fork of it. Some people call it the original design concept called Bitcoin SV, which has larger block sizes. I've interviewed Kurt from CoinGeek, who's their chief historian and a real big Bitcoin guy, on my channel a couple of times about that. And the reason he likes Bitcoin SV is because it's not small block, and it truly meets the potential of the original design. That being said, I agree with you that I think Bitcoin's going to go to the moon, because from your perspective, and what you said, I think that was really intelligent, was why not be in both from a speculative aspect? And I totally agree with that, and that's why I started the mining. And I do think that there is a potential for Bitcoin maybe to come out and be a legitimate competing currency eventually, but I think there's some challenges in the way it's implemented that I guess I kind of have problems with. One more thing I wanted to say real quick. I don't want to monopolize. Sorry, guys. One of the other things that I looked at was, I got your question next. One of the things that I looked at was the Lightning Network. So Lightning Network was developed to deal with the small block size problem. The problem with the Lightning Network is it's basically a commercial banker's wet dream, because the way that works is nodes have to have liquidity. So if I want to do a trade between the three of us, and Chen says, I want to send Bitcoin over to Mark, I have to have the amount of Bitcoin he wants to send. And what that does is it creates these liquidity pools across the system, liquidity providers, and that becomes a hub and spoke. Well, what's the most popular hub and spoke model that we have today? It's the fiat currencies and the central banks and the commercial banking system. So that would have to change. They would have to liberalize the way in which transactions occur and liberalize the fees. So those are my concerns. But again, those can all be solved. I think the original protocol has promise, but I think the way it's been implemented, there are some challenges there, and I'd like to see those addressed. Did y'all have any comments on that before? Okay. Yeah, we're running out of time. So last question, and then we'll intro the next session that's coming up right after this.
My question was kind of related to what you were just talking about, and I came in late, so I apologize if I missed it. Did you guys talk about the tornado mixer sanctions that were just imposed? Tornado mixer, which is.
You can probably tell us.
Yeah, so Tornado Cash it's a privacy chain. So the way it's made, it's to like mix people's funds. It's a mixer. So when they found out who was associated with those accounts, they basically started shutting down accounts that are associated with it. So they blacklisted over 250 Bitcoin addresses that they know are associated with those Tornado Cash accounts. So again, obfuscating what you're doing is the problem. Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency is a tool. It's not. But when you try to do shady stuff, you're going to get caught. Again, there's nothing hidden in the blockchain ledger. The blockchain ledger is truth. You can't get away from it.
Okay.
So my question is, Tornado is a mixer that anonymizes your transactions, and as soon as that happens, they shut it down. They don't want privacy. And so isn't that what Lightning Network is basically?
So no, Lightning Network, you still don't have the privacy, but what it does, and help me out with this, it helps clear transactions.
So the Lightning Network makes the transaction scale quicker, but has nothing to do with privacy. Litecoin came out with Mimblewimble, which is the privacy feature. So Litecoin has Mimblewimble in there, but Bitcoin does not have that within their ledger.
So Lightning essentially is just a faster way to process transactions because the chain can't handle so many, and then they settle up at the end of the day. Just think about having two ledgers. You have the busy ledger, which is handled here, and then you have the settlement ledger at the end of the day, and that's essentially what Lightning is. Okay, thank you guys so much for attending this. I think next We have another panel coming up next. Let me intro that real quick before we get it. I think we're going to have commodity market nationalization. One of my mentors, David Morgan, and also Jeffrey Christian is going to be here. Y'all stay tuned for that. That starts at 10:15. Appreciate you guys. I'll have a couple of speeches, and I have a booth if you want to see me, Gold, Silver, Pros. Thank you so much.